Hello and welcome back. This is the week 15 lecture, and this is the final lecture of the semester, so we can all rejoice. I'll keep it relatively brief this week because I know we're all busy working on Essay 4. So I just want to talk a little bit about drafting and post writing today. I want us to kind of get oriented and talk about what we need to be doing here right now this week. And I also want to talk about citation rules because we have not talked about those yet. And they are very important here in Essay 4 because, as we know, this is an argumentative research paper and we need to use at least two outside sources to help us make our arguments. So, for the first time all semester, research is required. It is a required part of this essay assignment. So I know some of you have used outside sources previously, maybe on Essay 2, perhaps on Essay 3, but now it's required. Now everybody needs to do it. So what that means, among other things, is that we need to make sure that we are comfortable with our citation rules. And when it comes to MLA citation rules, and we have to know them and use them anytime we're using research, anytime we're using outside sources. And when it comes to MLA citation rules, we have to remember that there are two levels. And we're going to talk about both of those levels today. I've also posted a helpful document in the week 15 module simply called Citation Help. It is a Word document and it is exactly what it sounds like. I'm just giving you guys some examples of different types of citations so you can use my examples to guide you when you are writing your own. Also, just a quick rundown of a few other things that you'll find in this week's module. I've reposted a document that first appeared last week in the week 14 module. It's just called Argument Stuff. So it's basically just an overview of everything we've covered over the last few weeks. So I'm kind of reminding you guys about all of our key terms and concepts, claims, the different types of appeals. I'm putting in the Tolman model. Remember, we talked about that basic argumentative structure consisting of claims, support, a warrant. I'm also putting in the Rogers or the Rogerian argumentative style, which is more compromise-minded, more geared towards finding middle ground with your opponents. So we've covered all of this stuff over the last few weeks. So I'm just putting all of that once again in sort of one place in one document so you don't have to comb through all of the different modules. So just take a look at those, just kind of go through that document. We'll talk about the citation help document in a moment. Another thing I went ahead and put in the argument stuff document is a little brief rundown of common fallacies. And we didn't go over this in lecture. I don't think you guys really want to listen to me run through each one of those common fallacies and define it and explain it and talk about it. I just went ahead and defined them in the document. So those are just things to avoid, common mistakes to avoid, fallacious logic, flawed reasoning. So I just provided some of the most common types of fallacies that you guys can avoid, along with the appeals, along with all of our important terms and concepts, the Tolman, the Rogerian model, everything that we've covered, it's in the argument stuff document. So if you're unclear on anything, if you missed anything, or if you simply need a refresher, go back to that document. Also, let's just talk a little bit about assignments, what's coming up. So most of you have noticed by now, and you'll see this also in the week 15 module, of course, the rough draft of Essay 4 is due on Wednesday of this week, December the 8th. So we haven't done this with our previous essays. I have not required you guys to submit really anything prior to the final draft. But as we know, I wanted you guys to submit outlines at the end of last week, and I want rough drafts of Essay 4 by the end of the day on Wednesday. And the reason we're doing this, as we can probably tell, is simply because Essay 4 is longer, it's a more complex assignment, it's worth more points, it's going to take a little bit more effort to put it all together. We're using outside sources, we have a lot of moving parts, so I just want to make sure that we are following all the steps, all the stages of the writing process. So I'm going to get you guys some really brief feedback on the outlines. Mostly that's just a completion grade. I just want to make sure that you guys have outlines, that you're using outlines. But if I see any major issues, any major red flags in your outline, I'll certainly alert you to that. And it's the same deal with the rough draft. So I want to be clear about this. I'm always happy to look at individual rough drafts, but because of the sheer number of students that I have this semester, I can't look at everyone's rough draft in a great deal of, with a great deal of detail and attention to detail. So the way I'm kind of treating the rough draft submission is much like the outline. It's largely a completion grade. I want to see that you have a completed draft, or at least something very close to a completed draft, so I know you guys are going through all the steps. But I'm not really going to give you feedback on the rough draft unless you specifically ask me to. So if you want to send me an email, get in touch with me and make it known, make it clear that you want feedback on the draft. You can also make a note inside Canvas when you're submitting the file. A lot of students don't care to see my feedback. They just want to get the completion grade and move on to the final draft. And if that's how you feel, fine. Because like I said, logistically, I can't really look at every single rough draft from every single student, at least not closely. I can just skim through them. But whoever wants the detailed feedback, I'm guessing that won't be a huge number, so I should be able to accommodate everybody who wants feedback on their rough draft. You can also just email me your rough draft. If you have a more updated, a more polished rough draft by the end of the week, like maybe around Friday, you can still get full credit for the rough draft that you sent in on Wednesday. But if you're continuing to work on it, continuing to add to it, and you want to give me an updated, better version, Friday is the cutoff, just like normal, right? I've always told you guys for all of the previous essay assignments, they've always been due at the end of a week. So I've always told you, if you can get me a rough draft by the Friday of that week, I'm happy to look at it, give you feedback, and you'll have time to make some revisions and edits before submitting the final draft on Sunday night. That's how it's always been. Now, the final draft is going to be due on December the 13th, which is Monday. So I'm posting this video on Monday morning, so 1 week from today, next Monday, final drafts are due. So I'm giving you guys that one extra day. But you can still submit Sunday night if that just feels right to you. You don't have to wait until Monday. The assignment's available next Monday. The assignment's available. You can submit the final draft when you are ready. But there's no need to rush, and you don't get any extra credit for being super early. So take the time that I'm giving you. That's the final assignment. Obviously, we don't have to do anything else beyond Essay 4. So take your time, use this full week to get everything done. But just make sure you get that rough draft in, and if you want feedback, just talk to me, communicate with me, and I'm happy to provide it. Okay, but if I don't hear that request from you, I'm just going to look at the draft very quickly and give you credit for submitting it. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions about that. And of course, we can talk more about rough drafts throughout the week. But clearly, at the beginning of this week, hopefully you're all watching this on Monday or Tuesday, and hopefully by now you are drafting. I told you guys last week, get started on the research and go ahead and crank out an outline. So hopefully, again, the outlines were due at the end of last week, so hopefully you guys got started on that stuff. You know what you're doing, you know your topic, you have a pretty good idea of your argument. If you've already submitted that outline, that means that you have a plan. You have a plan in place for all the paragraphs that you're intending to write currently, and you might have to add a few more, but that's good. If you have that outline and you feel fine about it, that means you are ready to start drafting, and there's no reason to delay. Go ahead and get moving. If you can draft over the course of Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you can submit the rough draft on time. It's not going to be polished. It's not going to be exactly what you want, and that's fine. That's normal. That's the way rough drafts are supposed to be. You can use the end of the week to finish the writing process. That means post-writing. Leave yourself some time to revise and edit. And again, I can help. I can tell you some things that you need to do during the post-writing process if you want feedback from me. So just keep all of those deadlines clear and the rough drafts available, the assignments available, and the final draft assignment. They're both available and currently visible in the Week 15 module. All right, so again, I don't really want to review everything that we've already covered. That's why I made that document, the one-stop shop for everything that you need to incorporate in this paper. I just want to encourage you guys to use that document and to maybe go back and review some earlier weeks' overviews. I think we started argumentative writing, what was it, week 11? Maybe week 12? Double check that, but it was one of the two. We've been working with this stuff for several weeks now, so there's a lot of stuff in the week 12 module, there's stuff in the week 13 module, week 14, and here in week 15, it's mostly just review. But make sure that you have a lot of original claims that you've developed about your topic, those debatable statements, they come from you. Make sure you're finding evidence through your sources. We're going to talk more about research in a moment. And don't forget about the appeals, both the artistic and the inartistic appeals. Remember, artistic, they come from you. That means emotional appeals. That means the ethical appeal, ethos, which is really your credibility. Emotional appeals, that's pathos. And then logical appeals, that's logos. So those types of appeals come from the author, come from the arguer. You are creating them. And then we have inartistic appeals, and those are really just different forms of evidence that we often find through our sources. So numerical evidence, testimonials, that just means the words of others, maybe their expert opinions if you're quoting experts that you found through your research, or they could be regular people who are eyewitnesses to whatever it is you're writing about, or they just have some kind of insider knowledge or firsthand experience. And then you can also use anecdotes. Those are extended examples, which kind of feel like narratives. They often are little stories. You can even use graphical evidence, graphs, diagrams, charts, pictures, and other forms of essentially visual aids. So those are all what we usually call evidence or inartistic appeals. The stuff that already exists in the world, you're not making them, you are simply finding them. And we normally find them through research. So again, don't neglect the research and make sure that you have a couple of sources before you start drafting, because you don't want to stop the drafting stage in order to go back to research and to go back to the databases and start doing new searches and looking through new sources. That's why I wanted you guys to get started on that stuff last week before we were drafting. The research could kind of get rolled into our pre-writing stuff, our idea generation, and our outlining. So all of that really needs to be done by now. And if you still need to do some more research, if you haven't found at least 2 good sources yet, you really need to focus on the research very early in this week so you can start drafting soon. So remember, when you're putting together a rough draft, don't get too wrapped up in making everything perfect or making everything exactly how you want it. When you're drafting, it's important to just write. It's important to write as much as you can. Take that rough plan that you have in your outline and turn that into complete, well-developed paragraphs. If some of the writing is a little bit rough, if you have some mistakes, that's no big deal. We don't need to worry about that in a rough draft. Obviously, those things will be problems if they turn up in a final draft. But the whole reason we're submitting rough drafts midweek is so we have plenty of time to revise and edit, and we can get rid of those mistakes. We can tighten up or revise any unclear or awkward sentences, and we can make those final improvements. We'll have time later in the week to do that. So with drafting, just give yourself a block of time, sit down and write. And try to complete the draft, get it in by Wednesday, and you can take a small break. Sometimes it's good to get away from the paper for a little while. Let's not get burnt out. And I know we all have other assignments to be doing. We all have other classes, other responsibilities, even if they might not be school related. So just, take a break. Maybe take Thursday off. If you've gotten your rough draft in on time, you take Thursday to do other things. And then by Friday or the weekend, you can return to that rough draft. Maybe you have feedback from me, or perhaps you didn't ask for it, but you can take some time to revise and edit over the weekend. So I'll talk a little bit more about revising and editing at the very end of lecture, because I kind of want it to be the last thing that you guys hear from me. But first, let's talk about citations. This is very important. And like I said, I've already put some helpful info about citations into the week 15 module, but I just want to explain some basic things to you guys. And again, this is stuff that matters now on Essay 4, and it's also going to matter big time in 102, because you're all going to be doing more extensive research in 102. And these citation rules are going to be important any time you're doing research. So you guys probably know that there are multiple different citation styles. And depending on what discipline you're in, you're going to use one or the other. So in English, we use MLA. A lot of other disciplines use APA. And some disciplines use Chicago style. They're all a little bit different, but they all serve the same basic purpose. They are ways to cite our sources, and that's essential. It's not optional. It's not something we only do when we feel like it. It is essential anytime we're dealing with outside sources. So like I said, in English, our style is MLA. MLA is not often used outside of English. So APA is probably the most commonly used citation style. And some of you will use it soon, or you might be using it now. But we don't do APA in here. We do MLA. So make sure you understand the difference, because I know that there are a lot of citation generators online. There are a lot of ways to get these citations, especially works cited citations, done for you. And if you are using those, make sure you're getting MLA citations, not APA, because they are different, and you're not you can't use APA for what we are doing. So let's talk about the two levels. When we're talking about MLA citation rules, as I mentioned earlier, we have two levels. The first level, the easiest level, are in-text citations, also called parenthetical citations. So these are short, simple, easy to write. And just like the second name, this is the same thing. In-text citations, parenthetical citations, same thing. Just two different names for the same thing. But they will be inside parentheses. And you guys have seen these. You've probably done these before. So on page 1 of my citation help document, I'm showing you several examples of different types of in-text citations. Like I said, in-text citations are easy. Typically, if we are using an article or a book, the best kinds of sources, like we were talking about last week, maybe a magazine article or an article from an academic journal. Typically, with those kinds of sources, all we need to provide in the in-text citation will be the last name of the author and a page number. All right, and we're going to need to provide one of those in-text citations anytime we are quoting from that source, anytime we are summarizing from that source, or simply pulling a few facts from that source. It doesn't matter. And that's what you guys need to remember. I think most of us have at least an awareness that when we're directly quoting and we're using somebody else's words, we typically need to cite that. And that's true. If you're directly quoting a source, you need to put the words from that source, because that's what a quote is, right? You're using somebody else's words. So you have to put those words inside quotation marks, as we probably know, and then you need an in-text citation after the quote. So we often see that, and we're kind of aware that we need that. But remember, even if you're just summarizing a source, even if you're putting information from that source into your own words, even then, you still need to provide an in-text citation. And just remember what citations are for. If you think about what they're for, if you think about their purpose, they'll become a lot easier to get right. All citations do is they give credit where credit is due, right? So if you're using somebody else's words, you have to show us that those words belong to somebody else, right? And the quote marks are part of that. And then the citation is the other part of that. And then if you're summarizing somebody else's work, well, you don't need quote marks because the words are yours, but the ideas aren't yours. The findings in that article, they're not yours. Somebody else did that work. So if you're summarizing the work that some scientist or professor or doctor did and then wrote about, then you have to give them credit. You don't have to quote anything if you're just summarizing because you're using your own words, but you're using your own words to talk about their ideas. So you show that by simply providing an in-text citation after your summary. So in-text citations almost always come at the end of a sentence. So I'm going to summarize Lackey's article. Okay, great. I'm going to spend a couple of sentences talking about a few of his key ideas. And then at the end of that second sentence, I'm going to simply put my in-text citation, Lackey 45, last name of the author, followed by page number, and then the period ending that sentence in which I'm continuing to summarize the source. The period ending that sentence comes after the citation, after you close the parentheses. So if you look at my examples on page 1 of the citation help document, you will see that the period comes after the citation, not before. The citation is a part of your sentence, so the period comes after it. Okay? So it doesn't matter if you are quoting or if you're summarizing. You must provide an in-text citation. And if you don't, because you simply forgot, or because you just didn't think it was very important, or you didn't feel like it, or whatever, you guys probably know, that's plagiarism. If you don't provide an in-text citation when you are using information from a source, or if you're quoting a source and you don't provide that citation, that's plagiarism, even if it's unintentional, even if it was just an accident, a mistake, an oversight, because you're taking credit for work and perhaps even words that do not belong to you. And that's theft, that's stealing, that's intellectual dishonesty. And that's basically what plagiarism means. And from my perspective as an instructor, I'm bound by certain college rules here, GBC rules. Doesn't really matter if it's intentional or unintentional. If you don't cite your sources, that's plagiarism, and the penalty is a failing grade. And there's actually additional penalties, but to start with, you fail that assignment. All right, so the citations are essential for Essay 4. That's why I'm really emphasizing them here at the end. I've provided that helpful document. I'm talking about citations in the overview, and I'm talking about them here. So please remember, and if you have questions, let me know. As you're writing your rough draft, try to include in-text citations as you go. Whenever you're using your sources, again, whether you're quoting them or summarizing them, maybe you're just pulling a few pieces of numerical evidence out of a source, fine. But those numbers came from the source. You have to give the source credit. So whenever you're using something from one of your sources in one of your body paragraphs, go ahead and put in the in-text citation at the proper place. Now, use common sense. If you're going to spend 2 or 3 sentences summarizing information from the same source, just wait until the end of your summary and provide the in-text citation there. Even if you're pulling stuff from multiple pages of that source, and one sentence comes from this page, the next sentence you're summarizing a different page or some important point on a different page, and then in the next sentence you're talking about yet another idea that occurs even later, you can provide a page range in that in-text citation. So it can be Lackey 37-39. Showing that you're pulling info from all 3 of those pages, not just from one page. So I show you an example of that. Again, in-text citations are not hard. And if you're using a source that does not have an author, a source that has been published anonymously, don't panic. That's not a big deal. Without the author, you go with article title inside the parentheses. And if that article title is long, let's abbreviate it, and you can just use the first, 3 or 4 words. But article titles always go in quotation marks, whether they are newspaper articles, magazine articles, articles from an academic journal, articles from a website, it does not matter. Article titles always go in quote marks. So if you don't have an author, but you do have a title, put an abbreviated version of that title in quote marks inside your parentheses along with the page number. If you don't have a page number, don't worry about it. But if the article or source is very short, and this might often be true with online sources, websites, you might not have page numbers, but if you're looking at an article on a website, you might at least be able to provide paragraph numbers, especially if the article is not terribly long. Obviously, you don't want to have to count a ton of paragraphs, but if it's not a super long article and there's maybe only 4 or 5 paragraphs, instead of page number, you can provide paragraph number. And I think I give you an example of one of those as well. So use my examples and don't overthink the in-text citations. They're supposed to be short. If you ever end up with a really long in-text citation, like a lot of stuff is inside the parentheses, something's going wrong. Like you don't need that much information. Like I said, we abbreviate titles if we have to use them at all. And typically we're just going to have author, last names only. I don't need first names there. We're just going to use last names and page numbers. Maybe an abbreviated title and a paragraph number. But we're never going to have that much info. At least not typically. We're not going to have that much info in an in-text citation. So if you have a really long one, something's wrong with it, and you need to get rid of some of that info. Okay, so in-text citations, they're simple, they're quick, they're pretty painless, but they're very important because if you leave them out, when you're quoting or summarizing in your body paragraphs, like I said, we have to deal with the issue of plagiarism. Now, the second level of MLA citation rules will be, of course, the works cited page. And everybody needs a works cited page for Essay 4. So this has to be at least a 4-page argumentative essay. And that means the works cited page, which gets its own page, it will be, for many of us, page 5. You have a 4-page paper, and then the works cited page is page 5. So it does not count. The works cited page does not count towards our page limit, our minimum page requirement, but it is required. You need a works cited page anytime you're dealing with research. So all of the sources that you provided in-text citations for in the body of your paper, those same sources need to appear on your works cited page. And works cited citations are longer and more detailed than in-text citations are. And you guys probably know that. We've all probably done a works cited page at some point. But we do not simply list URLs on a works cited page. We do not simply do our own kind of version of a shorthand for each source. We have to follow, once again, proper MLA rules. So depending on what kind of source you're dealing with, you're going to have different formats that you have to follow when you're doing your works cited page. So if you scroll down to page 3 of the citation help document, I'm showing you examples of different types of works cited page citations. So if you have an article from an academic journal, I'm showing you what that looks like on a works cited page. So you start with the author, last name first, then you go with the title in quotation marks, then you have to provide the name of the publication where that journal article or where that article originally appeared. So this is going to be the name of the journal. American Psychology, the Journal of Social Work, whatever, American Literature, whatever the name of the journal is, you need to provide that in italics, just like you'll see in my example. And then you have some additional publication info that you need to provide, like volume number, because academic journals have those. Volume numbers, perhaps an issue number. You're going to have page numbers. And then if you found that article using a database, like one of our library databases or even Google Scholar, you need to provide the name of the database as well. So just follow my examples. I'm showing you what a citation for a newspaper article will look like. Similar, again, start with author name, last name first, then the title, then the name of the newspaper. But newspapers are a little bit different than journals, so they have slightly different publication info. They're published more often, so the date of publication is going to be a little bit different. So I show you an example of a newspaper article. I show you an example of a magazine article. I show you how to do one for books, website stuff, info that we find on websites. So look at my examples. I'm covering the most commonly used sources. Now, you might be using something different and you don't see an example of it in my handout. If that's the case, just let me know. Let's talk, and I'll try to help you figure out how to cite this weird source that does not appear in my examples. But typically, for any kind of article, for any kind of book, and for any kind of website, you'll be able to use my document to help guide you when you're making your works cited page. And again, I know even if you're using the library databases, there's a way to automatically generate those works cited citations. You can use those devices. You can use those features. I can't stop you. All I would recommend is to simply double check. Whatever gets spit back out to you, look at my examples and make sure what you have looks like the appropriate example in my document, and I am labeling all of my examples. Also, a quick tip, and I think I mentioned this somewhere in the module, a good website to use if you're looking for citation help is the Purdue OWL. Purdue University is in Indiana, so this is through their institution. The OWL is sort of like a writing workshop webpage, but if you go to MLA citation rules, I kind of show you how to get there. You can find, once again, examples of almost any kind of source, and you can see how to format the proper type of citation for all of them on your works cited page. So again, in-text citations are short. The works cited citations are longer and they contain more info. So just keep that in mind. In-text, short and easy, and they're in the body of the paper. And then we have the works cited citations, which go on the works cited page, and that's the last page of the paper. And every source that we use has to be on the works cited page, and that includes the essay from 50 essays. So you should notice in my examples that start on page 3 of the citation help document, I'm showing you how to do a citation for an essay from an anthology, because that's what 50 essays is. It's an anthology. All right, so no matter what essay you choose, it's coming from an anthology. So I use, in my example, the Frederick Douglass essay. Okay, so if that's not the one you're using, just replace it with the title and the author of your essay, and everything else is going to look just like my example. All right, so just use that, if nothing else, when you're doing the works cited citation for the 50 essays piece. So at least, at minimum, you're going to have 3 entries on your works cited page. The essay from 50 essays that you chose, along with your 2 outside sources. You might have 3 outside sources, that's fine, but make sure you have at least 3 things on your works cited page. All right, so if you have any citation questions, let me know. And like I said, put the in-text citations in the rough draft. And if they're way off, or if they're just formatted wrong, I can probably point that out. Even if I'm not saying a whole lot on your draft, I can at least point out that your citations look weird. And on the final draft, make sure that you have both in-text citations and a works cited page. You must cover both levels. All right, so that's pretty much it. One more thing to look for on the citation help document, in between the in-text citation stuff and the works cited page stuff, I think on page 2, I have some stuff on what's called quote sandwiches. We haven't talked about these. These are only relevant if you're going to provide direct quotes. And some of us might not be. That's fine. But if you are planning to quote any of your outside sources or the author of the essay you chose to respond to in 50 essays, I'm showing you how to format direct quotes. So look at what I'm giving you on page 2. I'm giving you a simple structure to follow when you're doing direct quotes. Think of a direct quote like a sandwich. You need to introduce a quote, and then you need to explain the quote or follow up on it. So there's 3 basic elements here, and we can think about this like a very simple sandwich. We have a top slice of bread, we have the meat, and then we have a bottom slice of bread. So here, the top slice of bread is going to be your introduction to the quote. And I'm giving you some phrases and some sentences that you can use to introduce quotes. Very simple. And then the quote itself will be the meat of the sandwich, and then the explanation or the follow-up that we provide after the quote, that's the bottom slice of bread. So what we want to do is have an intro, and then that leads into the quote itself. Of course, the quote has quotation marks around it, and then at the end of the quote, we have our in-text citation, and then we end that sentence. And then we start the next sentence with our bottom slice of bread. So if you notice, my sample bottom slices are all ways that you can start the next sentence after the quote and after that citation. So look at my examples. If you're not planning on directly quoting anything, then you don't really need page 2 of the citation help document. But if you want to do good direct quotes, use the quote sandwich model. Too often, students just drop quotes into their paper with no warning, no explanation. They don't introduce them. They don't explain why they're using them. We call those quote bombs. They are just quotes that are coming out of nowhere, and they often don't help because the reader doesn't know why you're using that quote. So you're not introducing it, you're not explaining it, you're just dropping it in and then immediately moving on. So use the quote sandwich in order for those direct quotes to really work. Okay, so that's on page 2. All the other citation stuff that you need is there. So use that document, use Purdue OWL. Let me know if you have any questions. And I look forward to reading your final drafts. And I'm always available this final week. We can talk through email, but we can also set up a video conference. If you guys need help, if you want to go over a draft, we can always talk. I'm always free to meet. I'm pretty flexible schedule-wise. So good luck. Oh yeah, I did say I wanted to talk a little bit about post-writing. I almost forgot. Very quickly, we've already talked about it, but just remember the differences between revising and editing. Revising just means you're going back through your draft, your finished rough draft, and you're just making sure everything works. Do all your paragraphs work? Are they all well developed? Do they flow? Do they follow a logical order? Double check for stuff. Maybe grab that outline and make sure that you're doing all of the things that you set out to do, that you plan to do in the outline. Make sure you have a thesis. Make sure that you have topic sentences announcing the supporting claims that you're talking about in all of your body paragraphs. Make sure you have evidence for your claims. Make sure you're using appeals. Make sure you've written enough. But also scrutinize individual sentences and individual paragraphs. We have sentence level revision, paragraph level as well. Make sure they're all working. And if you see sentences that sound weird or paragraphs that aren't really doing much, work on them a little bit more. Just make whatever improvements need to be made. You might need to add a few things. You might need to take a few things out. But just spend some time on revision. And then finally, edit. Editing just means looking for and fixing mistakes. Sentence level errors, grammatical things, punctuation mistakes, formatting issues. Just double check. Make sure everything is clean and correct. Make sure all your formatting looks good. Make sure you have a works cited page. And let me know if you have any questions. Good luck. I've enjoyed this semester, and I hope to talk to you maybe again in a future class or if you ever need help. Have a great break, and good luck with Essay 4.